Radoslav Drzewiecki, known to those close to him as Radek, was a 29-year-old man living in Chesterle Street, County Durham, originally from Poland, and remembered by his family as someone who worked hard, cared deeply for those around him, and was preparing for a future with the woman he planned to marry. On the morning of March 29, 2016, just after 7:30 a.m., Radek left for work as he always did, riding his Kawasaki motorcycle toward the Houndsgill Industrial Estate in Consett, a short and familiar journey that gave no reason for worry, no hint that this day would end so differently from the others. As he rode along the A693 road between Beamish and Pelton, his helmet-mounted camera recorded the journey, showing how carefully he approached each junction, slowing, glancing left and right, and only continuing when it was safe. The small, routine checks that show a rider who understood the risks of the road. But as he drew closer to the industrial estate, the footage captured the moment when something unexpected entered his path, something that no amount of caution could fully prepare him for. From a junction up ahead, a Vauxhall Mariva, driven by a 46-year-old woman from Stanley, pulled out directly into his lane, leaving Radek with almost no time to react. There was little chance to avoid what came next. His motorcycle collided with the vehicle, and the impact left him with fatal injuries. Emergency services arrived, but there was nothing that could be done, and Radek was pronounced dead at the scene. The crash was a textbook example of what road safety experts often describe as a failure to yield. A moment when a driver pulls out without properly checking for approaching traffic, in this case, missing the oncoming motorcycle despite the open view ahead. The driver was later arrested on suspicion of causing death by careless driving, and in court she admitted guilt, receiving a sentence of 18 months disqualification from driving and 200 hours of unpaid community work. For Radek's family, and for many who heard about the case, the punishment felt far too lenient for a mistake that cost a man his life. Radek had been engaged to Magdalena Gowel, who spoke after his death about the deep loss she felt, urging other drivers to look twice at junctions before pulling out, because in her words, one extra moment of attention could save someone else's life. On June 5, 2022, in Durban, South Africa, a night that was meant for sport turned suddenly and tragically into something no one expected. Simiso Buthelezi, known to friends as a quiet, focused athlete, was 24 years old and had built a short but bright career since he began fighting in 2019, compiling a record that showed 4 wins, no losses, and 2 knockouts. And that evening, he was set to fight Sifaisile Mntungwa in a 10-round bout for the vacant WFG African lightweight title at the Greyville Convention Center. The fight had been competitive and tense, and as the 10th round opened, Buthelezi landed a series of punches that sent Mntungwa through the ropes.
Referee, which was bizarre. Let's take a look. In the walks onto a hard jab. Walks onto a hard.
But then something happened that left the crowd and commentators stunned.
Jab, and then he turns. And then he looks at the referee like he carries on like he wants to fight, and he doesn't know throwing punches. He doesn't know where he is.
No. This happened, Colin, almost 20 years ago between Okila Mlefe and there we go. Buthelezi having...
Yeah, look at his body reaction now, how he responds. He's looking, he turns, and then all of a sudden, inexplicably, turns and he chases the referee. He thinks the referee is the opponent. Look, the referee's still signaling punches. And here's a good call by the referee. The referee did the right thing, and he protected the fighter.
This is... Ladies and gentlemen, this is
Buthelezi suddenly seemed to lose his bearings, turning away from his opponent and throwing punches at an empty corner of the ring as if chasing something no one else could see. The referee, Elroy Marshall, quickly stepped in and called for the medical team, and within seconds the scene changed from sport to emergency as Buthelezi collapsed and was carried from the ring, only to be rushed to King Edward VIII Hospital, where doctors found a brain injury with internal bleeding and placed him in a medically induced coma. 2 days later, on June 7, 2022, the hospital announced that Simiso had died, turning a late-night sporting event into a moment of deep grief for his family, his trainer, and the boxing community, and the match was officially ruled a technical knockout in favor of Muntungwa. What made the outcome so hard to accept was that there were no clear signs before the fight that Buthelezi was ill. His trainer said he had seemed strong, he had been competitive through most rounds, and nothing during the bout suggested the sudden collapse, which has left doctors, fans, and officials asking how a young athlete in good shape could suffer a fatal brain bleed so quickly. Several possible explanations have been suggested. Some experts pointed to the long-term effects of repeated head impacts, where small injuries build up over time, and a subdural hematoma or swelling can form without a single dramatic blow, while others suggested extreme weight cutting and dehydration may have made his brain more vulnerable by reducing the cushioning effect of fluid around it. But none of these ideas is a firm answer, and the true cause remains uncertain. The aftermath also exposed the human cost of the event beyond the medical questions. Muntungwa faced online abuse and accusations from people who said he had caused the death, despite no evidence of a foul, and the governing bodies responded by tightening medical checks and calling for more careful pre-fight screening, including deeper neurological checks for fighters with any history or signs of head trauma. In the end, a young man with a promising record and a clear future in the sport died after a ringside collapse, and the boxing world was left with grief, questions, and a reminder that even a routine fight can hide risks that are not always seen until it is too late. On December 6, 2017, at Jiangsu Provincial People's Hospital in Nanjing, China, something deeply unsettling happened inside the hospital's parking area. This was not a regular open parking lot, but an automated carousel system, often called stereo garages or mechanical lifts, which are common in China's crowded cities where space is scarce. These structures are built to maximize parking efficiency, operating without attendants, and using elevators to move cars between different levels. But most of them lack strong pedestrian detection features. That morning, a woman estimated to be in her 30s or 40s was walking through the parking area while looking at her mobile phone, where this happened. Distracted by the screen in her hand, she approached the entrance of the automated lift and, without realizing it, stepped into the empty platform. It is believed that she may have mistaken it for an open passage or simply failed to notice the warning signs in place. Once she was inside, the heavy doors closed automatically and the platform began its descent to the basement level. By the time she may have realized something was wrong, it was already too late. At that very moment, a four-wheel drive vehicle was directed into the space where the platform had stopped. With no pedestrian sensors to prevent the action, the car struck the woman, pinning her against the wall beneath its wheel. Incredibly, she did not immediately attempt to escape or raise the alarm, possibly frozen in shock or still disoriented by the sudden movement of the machine. The silence of the underground chamber was broken only when her cries for help finally reached a nearby security guard who rushed to hit the emergency stop. She was pulled out and taken quickly into surgery, but the injuries were serious. Reports noted a broken leg and trauma to her ankle, though she somehow managed to survive. Afterward, much of the public reaction focused on her distraction. Many argued that she should not have been looking at her phone in such a dangerous environment, but critics of the parking system pointed out something else, that no one should have been able to enter the lift in the first place, and that the machinery should never have continued to operate with a person inside. There were no barriers, no sensors, and no fail-safes to prevent exactly this kind of event. In the end, she was fortunate to have lived through the accident, thanks only to the guard who acted quickly after hearing her cries. But even though machines are made to help us save time and space, if someone gets distracted for just a moment, or if a safety step is forgotten, a terrible accident can easily happen. On April 20th, 2010, a 75-foot fishing vessel known as the FV Northern Belle was making its way from Seattle to Dillingham, Alaska. The vessel itself had been built back in 1979 and was based out of Seattle, part of the long tradition of commercial fishing boats that worked the northern waters. On board were 4 people: Captain Robert Royer, age 54, Nicole Esau, 36, Todd Gnivola, 48, and Robert Jack, 52. Captain Royer was a cautious and seasoned mariner, and before the journey he had already voiced concerns about the vessel's heavy load. Instead of taking the faster but rougher route, he had decided to steer the Northern Belle through the more sheltered inside passage, hoping to avoid the worst of the open seas. But as the vessel crossed the Gulf of Alaska, roughly 50 miles south of Montague Island, the situation suddenly began to turn.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the Northern Belle. We are at 59 degrees, 10 minutes north, 146, 47 degrees west. This is the Northern Belle. Mayday, mayday. Roger, I understand the vessel name is Northern Belle. Break. Vessel Northern Belle, this is United States Coast Guard, Kodiak, Alaska, communication station on 4125, over. Yes, Coast Guard, Northern Belle. Go ahead. Vessel Northern Belle, this is ComTech Kodiak, request to know if you are in need of assistance, over. Absolutely, we are going down. Vessel Northern Belle, this is ComTech Kodiak. Roger, understand you are going down. Request to know persons on board, over. We have 4 persons on board. We are getting in a life raft here. We're going down. Vessel Northern Belle, this is ComTech Kodiak. Request you say again the persons on board, over.
The boat developed a sharp list to starboard, and at the helm, Robert Jack noticed the bow lifting unnaturally as the stern sank lower into the sea. He called out to the captain, and within minutes it became clear that the ship was in mortal danger. The Northern Belle capsized in less than 3 minutes. Investigators would later conclude that the vessel had been overloaded with too much weight toward the stern, leaving it unstable and vulnerable to swamping. The crew managed to put on their donned survival suits, and Captain Royer rushed back into the wheelhouse, but the emergency position indicating radio beacon was not functioning, leaving him no choice but to use the VHF radio to make a mayday call. He reported the position, described the vessel, and confirmed that the crew had gone into the water water. It was the only link between them and the Coast Guard, and it came at the cost of precious time. Even as he gave details of the vessel's color and length, his voice was suddenly cut off. That was the last transmission anyone ever heard from the Northern Belle. The crew attempted to launch their life raft, but in the chaos it drifted out of reach, leaving them no choice but to abandon ship directly into the 40-degree waters. The tilt of the vessel made everything more difficult, and as Captain Royer tried to follow his crew into the sea, he was struck in the head, possibly by a piece of equipment, and was lost beneath the water. The others, Jack, Esau, and Knivela, clung desperately to survival, spending more than 3 hours in the freezing Gulf before being rescued. At 6:40 that evening, a Coast Guard C-130 spotted them, dropping life rafts and directing a Jayhawk helicopter to pull the survivors from the water.
They have 4 people aboard. That is 4.
Vessel Northern Belle, this is Comsec Kodiak. Roger, understand you have 4 persons on board. Request to know description of your vessel, the make, length, and color. Over.
Target site, basket's going out the door.
Doing great back there.
Basket's going down. Hold.
Hold it.
Basket's in. Oh shit, the wave dropped out. Easy forward.
Alright.
Forward and left 10.
Roger. Coming. Just gonna drop out again here.
Hold.
Holding.
Basket's in the water.
Captain Royer, however, was later recovered unresponsive and pronounced dead. The 3 crew members endured severe hypothermia but eventually recovered, while the captain's dog, who had also been on board, was never found. The Coast Guard investigation revealed what Royer himself had feared from the start. The vessel had been dangerously overloaded, carrying lumber and other heavy cargo that drove the hull low into the sea. Despite this, he accepted the load and continued. While sinking, engine room flooding made the situation even worse, and the failure of the emergency beacon meant that Royer's final call was only as a lifeline. In the end, his decision to stay behind, to give that mayday, and to provide their location was the reason his crew survived. His sacrifice ensured that others would live, even as the Northern Belle slipped beneath the water for the last time.